Bruce Springsteen, the great theologian and philosopher, said, everybody's got a hungry heart. And it's true, isn't it? We all feel the same longing for strength and security, for significance in life, and for sweet feelings on the inside. And ultimately, all of this is a yearning for the God who made us. And the message of the Bible is that God longs for us too. He longs for intimacy with us, to share heart-filling affection with one another. That's the kind of God he is, and he made us in that same image. And we used to enjoy that immediate access and close intimacy with God in the garden. But human beings pushed God away, and God took a cosmic step back from humanity so that God's presence now, what we call heaven, became distinct and apart from us. But God longed to be close to his people. So God instructed Moses and his people Israel to make a place where heaven and earthly realities could meet. And I have a picture of it here for you. This is the Tabernacle of Israel with a special green line through it for some reason. I've been having a lot of technical difficulties making this, but we drive on, don't we? So here you see the place where heaven and earth meet, where people could get with God. To get with God, we have to take great precautions. And that's the point of all this special architecture that you see in the tabernacle. These structures, these pieces of furniture, and all the rites and ceremonies that utilize this space. Think of it this way. If you want to go visit a nuclear power plant, you want to go see the reactor core, think of all the layers of security and procedure and protection and that you have to go through to get there. There's a lot. And if you don't do all that, well, it's going to be like working in Chernobyl. It's the same as we approach holy Yahweh. This is the place where it happens. And now let me introduce you to the priest, a mediator who represents us in the presence of God in the tabernacle there. Think of him as like a nuclear engineer, specifically chosen, trained, and equipped to work in the holy presence of God's hot holiness. And just look at that outfit he wears when he's in there. Protective equipment, just think of it as. Once a year, he enters the most holy place to offer an animal sacrifice on the big altar, right here. Animal sacrifice. Once he offers that sacrifice, then he cleanses in the basin of water. Then he enters the holy place. And once a year, he goes then into the most holy place, the inner sanctum, with the blood of that sacrifice, to make amends for the evil that Israel has done. And the animals that die in this place die in the place of those sinful Israelites to satisfy justice, to redeem us from judgment, and so on year after year. But all of this was only temporary. It was partial. It's awaiting something greater. And ultimately that something is Jesus, which we're going to see in the next 4 weeks here as we dive into the book of Hebrews in the Sunday lectionary. But today what I'd like to do is set the stage for that by taking a quick tour of the temple, which is what this tabernacle evolved into. Now, we've seen already how David captured Jerusalem, how he brought the Ark of the Covenant, how he brought the tent of meeting into Jerusalem. He set it up on the temple, up on Mount Zion. And this is the place where Abraham had offered his son Isaac as a sacrifice to God. This is also where David set up the tabernacle. And when his son Solomon was ready to build the temple, he built it on Mount Zion. And I have a picture of that for you. Let's take a look real quick. Going to share my screen. Here is what the tabernacle evolved into. This is the Temple of Solomon. And of course, the first thing you notice is the vastly increased scale of the thing, right? So here is the high priest, dwarfed by this magnificent structure, unique in all the world. And you can see that the scale of it and the building materials and the artistic quality of it match the grandeur of Solomon's reign. Now, we're going to resume with Solomon next year in the third year of our summer series on the Old Testament after Pentecost in 2022. And we're going to see how Solomon's successors fell into idolatry and the abuse of God's people. And God warned them when they did that he was going to abandon the temple and Jerusalem. He would allow the Babylonians to come in and take his people into exile. And Ezekiel chapter 10 records a vision that Ezekiel had of the glory of God departing the Holy of Holies and leaving the temple in Jerusalem. Now, in 586, just a couple years later, Nebuchadnezzar came in and destroyed the temple. Boom, up into smoke, down into rubble it went. He plundered all the gold out of that place and left it a pile of rock. And it took 70 years before the people could come back from exile and rebuild that temple under Zerubbabel, a much more modest structure. And there's no record of Yahweh's return to the temple. In fact, the Old Testament ends with the promise at the end of the book of Malachi that the Lord whom you seek will suddenly come to his temple. And it's a very clear message to be continued. And of course, when you turn the page from Malachi to Matthew, you come to the genealogy of Jesus, and with the message being, here he is. And some of the first acts in the Gospels is to present baby Jesus in the temple. And in the Gospel of John, one of the early things that Jesus does is he comes down to Jerusalem, goes to the temple, and drives out the money changers. And this is the temple that Jesus came to. Let me share my screen with you. This is the temple that Jesus came to. Again, this is how, notice the scale, right? So now here's the high priest. This is the temple as it had been rebuilt from Zerubbabel by Herod the Great. In the 100 years before Jesus, Herod the Great, under Roman patronage, with vast wealth and scale, rebuilt the temple of Zerubbabel to be twice as large again as Solomon's temple. And whereas before Solomon's temple was just lined with gold on the inside, now Herod had the wealth to make the eastern face of the temple gilded as well. So whenever the sun rose, it would shine on this temple and it would light up the entire valley with the reflected glory of the sun on this gold. But it wasn't just the temple that was gigantic. It was the setting in which it was built as well. All right, so I want you to see here Solomon's temple, now Herod's temple, and the context is the courts, just how vast this was. But of course, that wasn't it, because this temple with its courtyards was situated atop the Temple Mount on Mount Zion, where Herod the Great had literally built a platform on top of Mount Zion, a vast gathering area that could house tens of thousands of pilgrims that came multiple times every year. You could put almost 100,000 people in this area here. So here's the temple building. Here's the temple building. Here's the courtyards. Here is the Temple Mount. Here is the Antonia Fortress that was occupied by the Roman garrison. And eventually, as Jesus warned, the Romans would besiege, breach, and burn, destroy this temple, so that as Jesus warned, not one stone would be left standing upon another. Now, where does that leave God's people now without a temple? Join us in the weeks ahead to find out how Jesus is the temple, how Jesus is the sacrifice, how Jesus is the high priest, how Jesus is the place now where heaven and earth meet, where souls find satisfaction for their hungry hearts. Thank you. I look forward to doing this study of Jesus and Moses' temple in the weeks ahead.